afternoon, as it's turned out now, to share some hands-on history with us. Our theme this week was Fun on the Frontier, which, if you read any of the diary accounts of the time, just didn't happen very often. It was, though, that once you reached Sutter's Fort, this was the end of the trail. And it was a fort, and it did represent safety and security for immigrants, whether they were coming by wagon train or whether they came by sea around the tip of South America. That once they got here, there was some respite and relaxation time, because Sutter had defended this place with 18-foot-high walls, over 20 cannon, and he had the ability to extend his influence beyond these walls. The fort was truly one of the most powerful military establishments in the Pacific. So powerful, in fact, it was never under attack. It was the headquarters of the United States Army and Navy during the Mexican-American War in California. But a lot of Sutter's influence, and the reason the fort was never under attack, had to do with just one piece of artillery, the one we're going to shoot for you today. We sometimes call it the little green gun. It is known to history as the Sutter gun, sometimes called Old Sutter, and it was even famous in its own time. There was something unique about this gun in California. And it's easy to see what that was if you look at the other cannon around Sutter's Fort. Anybody notice what's different about this one? This one has wheels, big wheels. That made it the only piece of rolling artillery in California. It meant that Sutter could march out to meet the enemy before the enemy ever got here. In 1845, he marched this cannon all the way to Southern California to fight in a revolution. The cannon then stayed in Southern California and fought in every major battle of the Mexican-American War in California. It was particularly strategic at the Battle of the Mesa, fought just south of what is now downtown Los Angeles, and was the last battle in California of that war. And then, in 1848, in a ceremony held in this yard, the gun was presented back to John Sutter from the American Army. Sutter removed it to his plantation on the Feather River, known as Hawk Farm, and there he used it to fire salutes to visiting dignitaries and in celebration of special events. Well, today you guys are our visiting dignitaries, and we celebrate you being here with a demonstration of how the militia at Sutter's Fort would fire the Sutter gun. Now, I'm going to go through the steps of the firing, and we'll be treating it as if we were in battle, and it's a live firing, except that I'm going to explain each of the steps along the way. Otherwise, if this was a battle, a crew of 6 to 9 men would be able to load and fire this cannon about once every 15 seconds, 4 times a minute, whether you loaded it with a 4-pound iron ball or with 4 pounds of grape shot, making it a very impressive anti-personnel weapon. Didn't make any difference. It could be loaded and fired rapidly. Well, today we don't need a crew of 6 to 9 men, because this crew has 1 woman on it. Carol, raise your hand for us. There you go. And she'll do the job of 4 of those men. So let's assemble a crew. Gunners, post! So the first step is clearing out the bore from the previous firing. To do this, we use something called a worm. Worm the bore! The worm, as you can see, is a corkscrew-looking device with a couple little tines on it. That's run down the bore of the cannon. That's what the inside of the barrel is called. It latches onto any debris left in the gun from a previous firing and removes it. But because we're using black powder, the molecules coming out the end of this gun, which you will see as smoke, are about 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit and are traveling about 1,100 miles an hour. So the gun can get very hot. It's necessary to cool the gun after each firing before you can place gunpowder in it again. So we call for a wet swab. The wet swab, big Q-tip dipped into a bucket of cold water, run down the bore of the gun, extinguishing the burning material, cooling the barrel. But now we've got moisture. Now we've got moisture in the gun. And one of the primary tenets of fighting with black necessary to suck up the moisture before we can put another charge into the cannon. So we call for a dry sponge. It's what they're doing over there, and why Mr. Biscuits doesn't have the dry sponge in his hand, is they're lighting a piece of rope that's on that long green stick. The green stick is called a linstock. The piece of rope is slow match. Slow match is just simply cotton rope that in this case has been dipped into an ingredient called potassium nitrate. Potassium nitrate, you might have heard it be called saltpeter or niter. It is the primary ingredient in black powder, but it does not become volatile in an explosive manner until you add carbon and sulfur to it. So simply as a fuse, it will just glow and burn. So now that we've got that lit, dry sponge. This sucks up the moisture from the wet swab, making the gun ready to receive powder. Originally, it would have taken about 8 ounces of black powder, which would have been wrapped in a cloth bag, like my shirt. But at 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, Captain Sutter hates it when burning linen goes all over those cedar shingle roofs. So today's charge is wrapped in 1846 aluminum foil. Present cartridge. So Mr. Pickering is going to present the cartridge to Mr. Elwell, who will present it at the muzzle of the gun. That's what the front of this gun is called. Hence, this gun is a muzzle loader. Mr. Biscuits will then ram it deep into the breech of the gun. That's what the back of the gun's called. At the breech of the gun, Ms. Koyama has on her hand a heavy leather patch called a thumb stall. She's preventing air being sucked down the vent hole at the back of the gun that might waste some lingering embers, causing the gun to go off before we're ready. So let's see, we got a bunch of gunpowder in there. Cannon ready to fire? Now we need a cannonball, don't we? So, this gun is capable of taking a solid 4-pound iron ball and throw it through the air as much as a mile. You guys think I ought to put that cannonball in there today?
No.
State Capitol's just about a mile away. And today the only thing we get is tourists. So. Today, instead of the 4-pound iron ball, we'll be using the dreaded half-ounce styrofoam ball. Present shot. Again, Mr. Pickering will present the shot to Mr. Elwell, who will present it at the muzzle. Mr. Biscuits, then using a ramrod, a long blunt stick, he will ram it into the breech of the gun. So that now in the bore, at the breech of the gun, we have the aluminum foil of packet of gunpowder with a cannonball sitting up against it. But now we need to create a fuse in order to ignite the primary charge. So we're going to ask Ms. Toyama to pick and prime. She's going to use a brass pick. Brass because it won't cause a spark the way iron or steel might, causing the gun to go off prematurely. She'll run it down the vent hole, puncture the aluminum foil packet of gunpowder, scramble it a little bit, so that now in the bore at the breech of the gun, there's loose gunpowder. And then from a small paper packet, she's going to pour a fine-grained, fast-burning gunpowder called a priming powder. The priming powder will trail down the vent hole, come into contact with the primary charge. She then leaves a little pile of that on top of the vent hole. And that's what we're actually going to light using the long green stick called the linstock. At this point, Mr. Elwell and Mr. Biscuits have the ramrods held up onto the wheel of the cannon. That indicates to the gun crew and everyone else that this cannon is now loaded and ready to fire. My final commands before firing the gun are going to be prepare to fire, clear front, and then the command to fire. However, because the gun may be very loud, when I reach the command clear front, I suggest you cup your hands in front of your ears to protect your ears. And I also know that there are people finding shade in the trees out there in the park grounds right now, and they don't know this cannon's about ready to go off. So, there aren't a whole lot of us. We're going to have to yell loudly in order to warn them. On the count of 3, I'd like you to join me in yelling, fire in the hole. That means there's going to be an explosion. So, count of 3, fire in the hole. 1, 2, 3, fire in the hole! Gun crew, prepare
Okay, fire when ready.